There's nothing more destructive than being driven to the point of which you feel like you're going crazy and you lash out and you abuse, you become abusive. Today I'm going to be talking about reactive abuse. What is it? Why does it happen? What does it mean? Are you, and I'm going to answer one of the questions that so many of us ask is it our fault? Are we doing something that's making us just react? Are we the crazy one? I know so many of you come on and ask me, am I the narcissist because I've lost it, I've snapped and I've become abusive? So let's talk about this really tough situation of reactive abuse, really get into the guts of it, because I know so many of us, we walk away and we feel terrible about snapping. So reactive abuse in the basic level is when you've been provoked into having a massive reaction. It's when somebody who's super toxic, often a narcissist, will do provocative things deliberately to set you up to the point that you finally just have had it. Think, for example, the number of times that we've seen toddlers, for example, or babies with an animal, like say a cat or pet, a dog, and they pick it up by the tail. Maybe they drag it around by the neck. I actually saw one girl kind of holding it around with the neck, kind of dragging it everywhere. They poke at it, they prod at it, they bug at it when they tease it when it's eating or whatever. And when we're watching this, this person, that this infant, this toddler is going to become abused. That this cat or this dog is going to just have enough of it, even the most patient animal, and just snap and lose it. That's essentially what reactive abuse is. It's when we get to the place when we have reached the end of ourselves because of provocation and we just lose it with this individual. But the thing is, with toxic individuals, it's not like a toddler or a baby who thinks that who doesn't know better. They're just, in their opinion, they see the animal like their dolly or their stuffed animal, and they're just loving on it. They don't know that this is harmful. But toxic people know what they're doing. They know that they're pushing us into a position of reacting and losing it, and it's done in a way for lots of complicated reasons, but it's done in a way to sort of make you, for them not to know that they're not the only bad ones, but also that you're bad as well. It's done to kind of share the limelight with you, to say, see, I'm not the bad one here. You lose it too. You're just like me as well. So I know a lot of us have had this happen to us when we've got into these positions to where we feel really like we walk away and we think, I don't recognize myself. Who did I become in this situation? This is just who I normally not am. I remember that my ex would do something really provocative and I would end up going into the bathroom. And I don't know why I went to the shower, but I would stand in the shower fully clothed. I'm not trying to take a shower. I wasn't trying to bathe, but I would stand in the shower and I would just scream. And the sad part was I lived in a condo with brick walls and it was made out of concrete bricks. And I know that there were opening that traveled up and down this whole corridor to all the other condos. So people could hear me doing this. And I just felt so crazy, so completely out of control. So we're going to talk about what is reactive abuse. Why do people do this? How do we stop it from when it's happening? Is it your fault that this is happening to you? And what to do with what to do with all the deep shame it evokes in you, but also what to do with how to get distance from it, how to get some space from it so that you're not so vulnerable when it's happening to you. So here are some things that toxic people do to provoke an intense reaction in us. Sometimes they'll do things like gaslight you, make you doubt your reality. They'll say that you didn't say something when you know that you did, or they'll claim that you didn't make plans when you know that you have. They'll do something that sort of makes you feel like maybe it didn't happen, that you feel like that was what happened, but you feel crazy now because you can't quite verify that it happened. And it just creates this kind of the cycle of confusion. They'll also use the silent treatment or withholding. I experienced a lot of both of these. The silent treatment is when they just stop talking, and it's not because they're emotionally overwhelmed or just too upset. That it's actually a way to control the conversation, that this is a form of punishment that they're eliciting on you. And they'll just walk away and the conversation is over. Here's another way that it happens too. It also happens with withholding. So it may be withholding of feedback or input. Maybe they won't tell you a decision, like you say, hey, are we going to meet after work today? And they just don't say anything, and you wait, and then you keep bringing it up, and then they keep not giving you an answer. Sometimes withholding, and I know men tend to complain about this more often than women, but it happens to both men and women, is they'll withhold intimacy. They'll actually withhold physical contact. Maybe they won't hold your hand, they won't hug you, they won't get together for spicy time, but there's a deliberate effort to just pull back from you, and they'll let it go for a very, very long time, to where you feel sort of desperate and clutchy, maybe even needy. I know maybe for men it brings up more anger for them, but there's this sense of just that this person is deliberately trying to hurt you, and you're being very provoked. I actually experienced a lot of that in my relationship, where it would just go on for long periods of time and there'd be no physical interaction. In fact, he'd kiss me on the forehead. It got to be a real big trigger to me. He wouldn't even kiss me. He would just kiss me on the forehead. It was just a way to push me off. They'll often use verbal jabs or insults. They'll use inside jokes to deliberately hurt you in a secret way that only you and them know what's being referred to. They'll invalidate you. You may even have this where they do triangulation and they compare you to somebody else. They might actually set you up and deliberately sabotage you. Say, for example, you've got some big event that you're going to, you know that it's time sensitive. They end up not showing up at the time that they're supposed to, and then they'll act like they forgot, or they didn't know it was today. Or how many of you have had your birthdays missed? Or they wait till the very last minute to get a Christmas gift or some kind of celebratory gift for you. Sometimes they'll do some type of prolonged emotional torture. It's really essentially what it is. Like they'll start a fight as you're going to bed. They'll keep ripping your covers off of you. They'll chase you around the house, won't let the issue drop. And you just feel like you can't physically get away from them, that they insist that you have this conversation. And even though you've explained yourself many times over and you're saying the same information, they'll say something like, I just don't understand what you're saying, or that makes no sense, or, I think that's not actually how it happened. I think it happened some other way. So you end up feeling like you can't ever get out of this crazy loop of discussion that just goes on, and yet they won't let it close, and you feel like you've done your best to explain it, but you can't seem to get it to wrap up. And then they'll also sometimes set traps for you. Well, they'll deliberately set you up in a situation where you're vulnerable, others are watching. Maybe, for example, say you're at a big banquet with your boss, and they'll put you in some toxic position, some hurtful comment that makes a really big dig at you, or comment, maybe they'll say comment on the way you're eating or something, but they set you up in a way that you just feel like you've been set up. This is a deliberate effort to provoke you, to get you into a position to making you really upset. So here are some examples of how provocations can actually happen, some physical, practical examples of provocation. They might say, I never said that, you're making things up. That would be an example of gaslighting. Or you maybe just get the silent treatment and they say nothing to you for days and you don't even know why. And you start to chase them around, pleading for some explanation of why they won't talk to you. They'll say something cryptic like, well, you know what you did. Or they'll say, I don't have to tell you, I think you can figure it out. Or some kind of mystical thing that makes you feel like you should know, but you don't know, but you know that something's wrong and it's just super painful. Or here's an example of public humiliation. They'll say something like, I'm surprised you managed to dress yourself appropriately today. Or, wow, you knew how to actually brush your teeth, or something like that, just to humiliate you, to really upset you. They might, as I said, they might withhold affection or pull away from you when you reach for them to give them a kiss. They'll say, I don't know if you deserve that right now, or something hurtful like that. You might find them bringing up mistakes and never let them know, never let you feel like you can get over it, or there's always a holding the grudge. You may end up feeling like you're being compared to their past ex, like, well, my ex would have never complained over something like this. They may even sabotage your success and say the only reason you got that promotion is because someone felt sorry for you. So you're going to find them doing these things that kind of deliberately set you up. And what happens when we get into these positions is it's so hurtful, so toxic, so insulting that we end up feeling like we want to break through that mask of smug contempt or smug superiority over top of us, or that grandiosity. We just feel like we want to like chop them off at the knees or get even, kind of level the playing field. And so we end up in those moments just snapping and losing it. I would love to hear what some of you guys have experienced in your relationship. If this has happened to you, how it happened to you, what did you do to sort of get your own equilibrium and kind of figure out, that it wasn't you? Because, when it happens, our first reaction is that there must be something about what I've done, or something is inherently wrong with me. Maybe I'm really broken because this is normally not like me. We're raised to take accountability. In fact, how many times have all of us heard things like, well, it takes two to tango, or what did you say to provoke that? Somehow we asked for it, and that's why we got into these positions. And so we end up feeling like it is our responsibility. And here's the other thing that's really toxic about this. Predatory or narcissistic people don't take accountability or responsibility. They offload and blame everyone around them or the situation around them for what's going wrong. They don't see themselves as the instigator of the problem, but they know that you do. And they know that you have a high level of conscientiousness that makes you susceptible to owning things that maybe not even are things for you to own. As it is, they've already been getting you to take on their emotional responsibility. They've been getting you to sort of like try to keep the tone in the house really level and calm. They've been getting you to take a responsibility for a lot of things that aren't necessarily yours. And so they assume that you're going to take responsibility for this as well, which is why when it happens, then they can kind of point at you and say, see, you're no better than me. You're just like me. You don't have any more control of your emotions than I do. And as a result of that, that makes you feel like maybe it is a two-person problem. Maybe you're not any healthier than them. Maybe both of you are having issues. But I really want you to go back to remembering this picture of the toddler provoking the pet. We don't blame the pet for lashing out after it's been dragged around by its tail, or, pinched, or have its whiskers pulled, or its food played with. We know those things are emotionally abusive. We know those things are likely to cause a reaction. So we understand when the animal reacts that it's been provoked into that corner. So I'd really like you to think about that this person has deliberately provoked these situations from you, that they have known that this is provocation, that it's upsetting. And by the way, let's flip it around. What do you think they would have done if you've done this to them? Now really think about that. If you had pulled any, or like even half of the things that they pulled, do you think they would have been calm and reasonable? Do you think they would have kept their cool in the middle of that? Oh, absolutely not. And they would, of course, said it was because of you. Of course they would have said it was because of you. So this is, I really want you to, because I know, I guess I'm stumbling to say, I know that it is easy to feel like you're the bad one when you've done something like this, when you've reacted and out of provocation. It's really easy to feel like it's your fault. But remember, this is a reaction. In fact, I had a conversation with Roller Coaster of Love. It's on this week's podcast, if you Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. And we were talking about, I hate the fact that we call it reactive abuse. I just hate that. I feel like we should have called it something else. But she thought, this is what her take on it, and I really love it. She said, it's abuse. It's a type of abuse. Just like we say that there's covert abuse and there's financial abuse, this is reactive abuse. This person has abused you to react. I used to take it this way. I used to think, I'm being abusive because I've reacted in an abusive way. Therefore, it's reactive abuse because I'm identifying the abuse as my abuse of my partner, instead of me reacting to the abusiveness of my partner that evoked a response in me. And when she said it that way, it was like, wow, that was so helpful, because I had always flipped it and took it somehow that it was my fault for losing it, that I was labeling myself as being abusive instead of reacting to abuse. So next time you hear reactive abuse, I really want you to, and you blame yourself, I want you to think about twisting that phrase in that new direction and see it as a different form of abuse, just like there's financial abuse and other types of abuse. So what causes us to lose control? So here are some things that kind of work against us, that bring us to the breaking point. And I want to save the biggest ones that I think that are most pivotal, that I see most often go wrong, and then get into how to not have that be so true for you. So one of the reasons is we just are emotionally overloaded. We've been stressed, we're hungry, we reach the end of ourselves. And when this happens, the part of your brain that deals with this type of intense stress and reaction, actually, it shuts off the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain. It kind of shuts it off so that you're not thinking clearly. You don't have the full capacity to reason, to kind of consider alternative options, to do better planning. You don't really have access to that. And because of that, you're more vulnerable to an emotional outburst because you're in a reactive mode, not in a proactive mode. Another reason why we lose control is because of cognitive dissonance. And this is where we have these two competing perspectives of our partner. They say they love us, but then they do these things that are so hurtful and confusing and insulting and disrespectful. So we end up feeling like, do they love us or do they actually hate us? We can't really kind of tell the difference. And we start to feel really confused about the reality of what's actually happening. And that causes us to be emotionally unstable. I remember when the cognitive dissonance was at its worst for me, I felt so in a fog, so unsure of what's real, that I wasn't even for sure what was real for me, let alone what was real for the relationship. Definitely didn't know what was real happening with him. So this kind of intense confusion, again, affects the prefrontal cortex, affects your executive functioning part of your brain, and makes it really hard for you to think clearly and think through it. You also have been living in these relationships on hypervigilance, on high alert. Toxic people create a chronic state of lack of safety. So you know you're in danger. Maybe you say, well, I don't think they're going to really come out and hurt me. Maybe they're not going to, like, it's not going to be violence here. But you do live in the state of feeling like there's this chronic state of unrest and uneasiness. You always wonder when the next shoe is going to drop. They tend to create a lot of chaos, and all of that puts you into this state of hyper alert. And again, it primes you for fight or flight. So think of that you've been primed to be in a state of more likely to lash out, more likely to be triggered, more likely to be reactive. So when you're in this state, you're really in a survival state when you're more likely to have a fast response. There's also, they attack our sense of ourselves, our self-esteem. They're demeaning us. They tend to make us feel like really crappy about ourselves. We tend to feel like insecure and not on stable ground. So it often can feel like a perceived threat to our self-esteem or a perceived threat to our sense of safety. And often they use unfairness. They'll do this thing where it's almost hypocritical. Well, they'll sort of like, you know that you have overlooked a lot of ways in which they've been hurting you, taking advantage of you, been unfair to you, and you're in this place of you feel like you've been stretched beyond reasonableness, and you have a lot of resentment build up, and then they'll do something that says, you're just the same as me, you're no different. And you know that that's wrong. You know that you've been long suffering, maybe your boundaries haven't been very solid and very good. You know that they have been so abusive to you that it's been unfair, and then they'll do some perceived slight that you know that in no way shapes up any near the direction of the same. Back in the day, my ex was a serial cheater, and I had a very close relationship that sometimes it was maybe emotionally a little too close because I confided in this person, maybe in things I shouldn't have confided in. And he would compare my close emotional relationship as the same as his cheating. He would say to me, well, you're not any better than me. You had this emotionally close relationship where you've confided things maybe you shouldn't. So why would you think you're so much better than me? They do things like, and then next thing you know, you're arguing, trying to disprove that that's not true and it's not the same, and that what they've done to you is so much worse. So they'll use the perception of unfairness against you as a way to be very, very provocative. And then they'll also use shame. They're very good at making you feel like somehow what they do and why they do what they do is your fault. That somehow that you've set them up, and that you're not perfect enough and not good enough in order for you to, like, so somehow that you feel like you have to be this impossible standard bearer, and if you're not, then somehow everything's all your fault. Like, well, you didn't remember to tell me at this time about this thing. Here's how my ex would do it. He would do something catastrophically hurtful, like really big, over the top. And I would be so paralyzed by the shock of it and the pain of it that it would take me hours to be ready to bring it up. I couldn't talk about it. I was so like speechless that I didn't have the words to bring it up. And he would say, because I didn't bring it up in the moment that I caught him, that therefore it wasn't that big of a deal. That I lost, like, it's almost like he said there's like this window of time, and somehow because I didn't like do this in this right window of time, then I had no justification for bringing it up at all. So they will use these type of examples as a way to kind of as a got you, which makes you feel insane and crazy, and you want to really disprove them as a result of that. Here's the other thing, and this is a more bigger thing that I really want to talk about, get more into, because this is the key to breaking this, is that we get emotionally fused with these individuals. So what do I mean by emotional fusion? Emotional fusion is when we feel a sense of dependency on that person's approval and opinion. We feel a dependency on the connection with them, and we really want them to like us, be in a relationship, be on the same page with us, things to be good with us. And when we feel them being upset or insecure or unhappy, we start to feel very anxious, like we've got to fix things for them. Here's a good test of emotional fusion. Emotional fusion means that if they're upset and shaky, you feel upset and shaky. That you can't find peace if they're not in a peaceful place. Then you know that you have some form of emotional confusion with that individual. And when that happens, we become very desperate for their validation and very desperate for their affection. And any type of emotional withdrawal or criticism or anything that threatens that relationship makes us feel like we're threatened, like our sense of self is being threatened, like we're going to be abandoned by this individual if they do something, like we're kind of like petering on a precipice, like an edge of something, and all it takes is we're going to fall off the cliff with their lack of approval. And often when we get into these positions, we're very emotionally fragile, we're very reactive because we're desperate for them to feel love and approval, and so we're like really like trying to connect with them. You know, like for example, you ever had siblings where you and your brother and sisters got in a fight and they stuck their fingers in their ear and started screaming la la la, and you just wanted them to hear you. You just wanted them to get the point across and have them say, yes, I get it, I understand, I love you, we're okay. And they wouldn't do that. That's that moment of when you feel like you're being driven to snap and to react. So one of the things, so this is kind of, I want to move into now, how do you then become less reactive if you're in one of these toxic relationships? How do you regain your equilibrium so that you're not so emotionally vulnerable to someone who's doing this to you? I want you to start to remember that you have yourself. That even if you lose this relationship, as important as this person is to you, and as much as this person is intimidating you and threatening you, you still have you. You still are here. I want you to really hold on to that so that you don't feel like that you're losing yourself if you lose their approval. So one of the things is really, really helpful is to recognize that this pattern is existing, that this person is provoking you and doing this on purpose, that they're doing this as a way to gain control over you, but doing this also as a way to diminish you and make you feel crazy. So just even seeing that, having that I call it getting the map view. You know how when you're looking, you're in a city and you're driving and you're lost and you don't know where you're at and you see the road sign, but you don't know where that road is in juxtaposition to any other road. Sometimes if you pull out a map and you look at it and you can look down and you see that road and where it can connect, suddenly everything starts to make more sense and you have better landmarks. That happens for us emotionally too. Sometimes we need just to pause and pull back and realize this person is saying these things on purpose to provoke you. They're trying to provoke you, and just even labeling the behavior. Like this person's doing this on purpose. It's amazing to me. When I do that, it snaps me out of the moment. I suddenly I stop being in the flow, in the feelings, and I suddenly have a different perspective. It's a complete shift. So that's one thing to try to do, is just to recognize the pattern, recognize the way in which they're trying to set you up, and then label it. I'm being set up. This person is trying to provoke me. That can give you so much control over yourself, just to shift the perspective. The second thing I want you to do is start to create more emotional distance. Here's what I was told to do back in graduate school when I was training to be a psychologist. Because sometimes you'd sit in a room with a client who is telling you such a powerful story that you feel kind of taken in by it and overwhelmed by it. Well, it works the same for this. When that's starting to happen, I want you to envision yourself in a bubble. I don't know how many of you guys have seen Lord of the Rings. In the first movie of the trilogy, by the way, I'm a science fiction and fantasy geek. I love that kind of stuff. But there's a scene with wizard Gandalf, and he's meeting a demon. He's having this big fight, and he has a staff, and he throws the staff down, and he says, "You will not break this, or will not get past this." And when he does it, a bubble comes up around him. He's surrounded completely in a bubble. I want you to envision yourself in a clear, crystal clear bubble, that you're inside of this container and the other person's outside of it. And I want you to see that distance, that there's something between you and them, that they can't actually touch you unless you allow it. See, that's a critical piece. They can't actually touch you unless you psychologically allow it. See, in order for reactive abuse to work, it has to connect with you. It has to hit you in a spot that hurts and bothers you and makes you feel shaky, scared, or insecure, or angry. So when you envision yourself in this glass bubble, you're putting the space between you and them and says, I get to choose what comes through this barrier. I get to choose if I want this person's, what they're saying about me, to actually be a reflection of me, or whether I just see it as garbage that they're sending to me. I don't need to accept the garbage they're sending to me. So I want you to see that you have a choice about how it impacts you, about how you take it in. And seeing yourself in a bubble is a great way to create that space. Then I want you to take a deep breath. Okay, why do we always talk about breathing? Have you ever noticed that? Anybody talks about trauma, talks about breathing? Well, it's because it's the one spot in your psychological makeup, in your well-being, in your, if you think of you as an organism, it's the one way in which you have both voluntary and involuntary control over your body. So by you being able to take a deep breath and then let it go, you're actually resetting your fight or flight system so that you're more grounded again. You're actually grounding yourself by doing that. So I really want to strongly encourage you, if you're starting to feel like you're hitting your breaking point, I want you to label it. This person's provoking me. I want you to see yourself in a bubble. I don't have to allow anything that they say affect me. I get a choice in this. And then I want you to take a deep breath to ground yourself. And then I want you to then find a way to maybe take a break. By the way, did you know, I know you know, but you don't have to give anybody an immediate response. You can say, that's interesting. I need to take a break to reflect on this. I'll come back. You can do that. Even if they sit and harp at you and chase you and keep yapping at you, you can just say, I'm not listening because I'm taking a break. You don't have to listen to them. You have control over that. But I want you to think of either psychologically removing yourself or emotionally removing yourself, or literally removing yourself from the situation, and just get a bit of space from that person. And then I want you to begin to think about the bigger picture. And this is the hard part. I know that for a lot of us, this is going to be really kind of tricky. the bigger picture is this person has been doing a lot of harmful things to you. They have not been honest. They're not taking accountability. They're not doing any work to improve the relationship. They've been very manipulative and they've been very selfish. Sometimes just reminding ourselves that this has been the reality of this relationship can be super helpful to helping us shift the focus and realize that this isn't really information about us. Because when we take it as information that informs us, like, you're always so difficult. Why do you have to make everything such a big deal? And you think, well, am I really difficult? Do I really make everything a big deal? See, I'm taking that information in. I'm actually like literally letting it inform me of who I am and what I'm about. But I don't have to do that. I can say, you know what? I know myself. I'm not for sure this is true about myself. I haven't heard this from other people. This is not a consistent message in my life. Sometimes we can, and you know what? This person does this a lot when they start to feel super insecure. Sometimes if we can just get the perspective that there may be the person has their own agenda, why they're saying it, maybe they're wanting to distract you, maybe they want to make you part of the problem, maybe they want to knock you down a peg because they're feeling insecure around you, but just getting that perspective sometimes can really give us a lot of control over what we think to be real and true. And then I want you to then affirm yourself. Here's another kind of thing that I know that I have a hard time with because I feel like it's a little hokey. But I want you just to remind yourself that you're an okay person, that you got this, that this person's opinion doesn't need to define you. Just because they're upset and say that you're the problem doesn't make you the problem. Sometimes if we can just sort of restate the truth and kind of get our feet back underneath of us again, can really help us function better when we're in the middle of this situation like this. And then I'd like you to begin to just sort of like take a deep breath, back out, recognize that you're being manipulated, and try to kind of calm yourself back down. Sometimes that's enough for us to create enough emotional space for us to be able to pull back and not be in this really reactive space when we lose control. As much as we want someone to want to be in a relationship, and as much as we want somebody to love us and care about us and be invested, we can't make people be nice, be kind, and be loving. We can't even make them approve of us. So sometimes realizing that all we need is our own approval, I know that's not easy. It's easier said than done. I do get that. But sometimes just recognizing that we're reaching an end to ourselves and that that's not who we want to be and how we want to act, sometimes that can be enough for us to kind of back away. So I'm going to wrap it up before I start to take your guys' questions with these key reminders. Reactive abuse is a form of manipulation. This person is trying to provoke a reaction out of you as a way to maintain control and a way also to knock you down a peg and to sort of like make you realize that you're not all better than that. Not saying that you ever thought that, but see, toxic people view the world competitively, so it's super easy for them to assume that somehow just because you had to have it together, that somehow you think that you have it together, that you're better than them. So sometimes they just like to level the playing field, especially if they've done something wrong. I bet, this is just a theory of mine. I don't know if this is true, but I have a feeling that if you really looked at when this is happening, something has gone wrong in their life and they want you to feel bad too. It's a way to sort of like, just because I'm really bad, I need you to know you're bad too. They want to make it, I've lost, now I want you to lose as a reaction, as a possibility as well. Always remember, you do have final control over your responses, and that walking away is not a weakness, it's actually a show of strength. And remember the long game. The long game is you. You're the long game. Remember, you matter more. That despite what's happening in this relationship, despite your heavy investment in this relationship, despite the fact that maybe you're trying to keep a family together, your sanity matters more. Losing it is going to benefit no one in this kind of situation. So I just really want you to think about that. So I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see your comments and start to talk about the things that you're thinking of in regards to reactive abuse. And I'm so thankful that you've joined me today. I missed you last week. I was on vacation. Actually, I was away with my sons, enjoying a really nice time away. And I'm glad to be back and here and talking with you guys and talking about these issues. So have you guys, let me throw this question out. Have you guys ever had an experience of reactive abuse? And what did you do to sort of recover from this when this happened to you? Oh, I heard the words roll out of their mouth. She needs to be put in her place after standing up. Yeah, sometimes I agree with you, Bando. Sometimes the reactive abuse is purely an effort to sort of knock you down and let you know that that you're no better than that. Somehow they've gotten this perspective that because they've done something really bad that you think that you're better than them, and you haven't. You aren't making that conclusion. Chances are you're probably feeling bad that something bad happened, but they like to just make sure that you know that you're not all that. And I think it's really out of their insecurity, and they're kind of like translating that insecurity and making you insecure by making you provoked. I'm glad Blissful says she or he's been provoked and they controlled it really well. I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm thrilled that you felt like you walked away and you were kind of held on to yourself. It's hard. I want to be honest with you guys. Holding on to yourself is really hard. It's interesting because I used to work with troubled teens and troubled children who are very provocative. If anybody knows how to start a fight, a teenager, especially a dysfunctional teenager or delinquent, really knows how to start a fight. But you know what the difference was? That I didn't have a personal relationship with them. So them being upset with me wasn't really upsetting. It was sort of like par for the course. I kind of knew they'd be upset. But there's something about when it's a loved one whose opinion really matters to you. They just know all the right spots to hit to just take it to another level. That's super, super painful. I also would love to know, how about you, everybody who's had this happen, put a 1 in the comments. Have you ever walked away from one of these situations and wondered if you're the problem? Maybe you've even wondered if you're the narcissist. If you've ever walked away from one of these situations in which you've wondered, am I the narcissist? Because you've been provoked, I really would love you to put a 1 in. Yeah, I see it. I think that's one of the most common questions I get asked when people come in and meet me. They want to know, how do I know I'm not the one who's having the problem? Because my partner says I'm having a problem. I react a lot, so I think that I am the problem. Yeah, somebody just said he screams at me that I'm the narcissist. Yeah, it's interesting, but I bet you if you looked at the relationships, if outside of this troubled relationship, unless you've had a series of toxic relationships, and that happens because we get familiar with them, and also we kind of want to save people. And on top of it, they know how to spot us. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we get into these kind of repetitive ones. But if you look at all of your relationships, the whole work, your relationship with your family, relationship with your extended family, relationship with friends, chances are you're not going to find this type of this kind of I can't say that word, reactionary response from them. You're going to find that that's just typically not you. And that's a really good way for you to know that this is being provoked. Sorry, you guys are hearing my glasses clang in the microphone. Apologize for that. I had to pick up a new pair of glasses here I am heading to Europe, and I don't have, thank goodness it was a subscription or prescription glasses, but I can't find my reading glasses, and I'm about ready to head on to a 10-hour flight. and I can't read or see anything. So I ran over and bought another pair, but they're kind of heavy. They almost feel kind of masculine looking. So I like them, but don't like them. That's how I feel about it. So Dr. Jacqueline says, he puts me in a situation that makes me behave in ways that I don't want to and then blames my behavior. That's exactly what we're talking about. That kind of toxic reaction, that kind of reactive abuse. So the question is, Dr. Jacqueline, do you know what to do to get the space? And hearing me kind of I hope you caught the part where I walked through what to do. What about those steps feel really tough? I would love to know where you guys are feeling like stuck, like where's it not working for you? Yeah, Cher, they'll blame you for everything. I guess the better question for you is, do you take the blame? Are you feeling like it is your fault just because they say it's your fault? Or do you know that it's not your fault, and what are you doing about that? So Susanna said, he threatened me after my reactive abuse that I threw his girlfriend's clothes into the bush and they're not home. He brings the supply home to flirt with and blames me for traumatizing her. I know, some of the stuff they do is absolutely ridiculous, Susanna. Just really ridiculous. And the worst part is we get bought into it, you know? Yeah, so Jess is saying, I'm autistic and can come off as too critical to him when he says it's me. Yeah, that's also another difficulty. I'm autistic too. I don't tend to be, I used to be more literal and blunt. I've lost a lot of relationships doing that, so I don't tend to do that as much these days. But I know that we don't always have a filter and we don't always know how we're coming across. And yeah, they love to use that against us. And I think, and haven't seen the research, but I really think this is true, that people who are neurodivergent are more vulnerable to narcissistic relationships. I think there's a correlation between that. You're going to see a lot of neurodivergent people getting into toxic relationships because we're vulnerable to recognizing the risk of the danger, and we're a little more vulnerable to just the love bombing and all of that, and it makes us get into these a little more susceptible to them. It says, I know it's not, but sometimes I have doubt and I feel confused, and every time I bring an issue up, he says, well, you do it too. Yeah, so Trippin' Bug says, I just don't know how to avoid and stop it. So I would love you to, next time that it happens, can you recognize the pattern? Is there a way in which it tends to happen? That in other words, is there a type, like they say, you do it too? That would be a great pattern. Can you recognize there's a way in which they tend to be very provocative and stir this conflict up with you? If you can recognize it, then you can say, oh, it's happening right now, it's happening this moment. And then that gives you ability to sort of say, okay, what am I going to do now that it's happening? It gives you like this, it creates a space so that you can then do something with the space when you have it. And one of them is to say, you know what, do I need to have this person feel this way about me? Do I need their opinion? Do I need their approval? That's what I started to do. I started to say to myself, do I really care what he thinks? Because in my case, it was a male partner. And me saying, you know what, I do, but I don't need to. So at least being honest with myself, I do, but I don't need to. So it gave me some perspective by just recognizing that. And then that gave just space, gave me a moment enough that I get a little more distance, so I'm not so caught up in the moment. Yeah, I was talking about autism and neurodivergence. I do think that maybe the autistic people and neurodivergent people are a little more vulnerable to the dopamine rush of love bombing. I do wonder about that. That you're not the first person to say that, and I have wondered the same thing. You know, Natural View, you're making a really good point. So Natural View said, he says it's all my fault. I don't believe him, but I get scared that no, she didn't use the word scared. I'm using the word scared. But I'm more nervous that the family and community might believe him. And I know that for a lot of us, that's a very controlling experience, that we worry about what will other people think, because this person's such a good, they're so good at scamming. They're so good at creating a narrative that people buy into. In fact, I think sometimes, they work on that. They work on a sob story, or they work on a narrative to sort of explain, like, you don't know what it was like to live with this person. They were so difficult. Every time I did this, I mean, they're really, I agree, they're con artists, I agree. But they're so good at that we end up thinking, wow, everybody's going to experience it. But here's the thing. Anybody who has a relationship with them knows they're not easy. Like, for example, Natural View says, I get worried about my son. Well, your son is experiencing this difficulty too, because the minute the rubber meets the road in that relationship and your partner starts to lose control over your son, they're going to pull the same tactics on your son or your family members that they're pulling with you. So often it just takes time, perspective, and experience with these individuals. I have found, here's what I've found. I've been in situations where I've gotten scapegoated, and I truly thought nobody saw it the way I saw it, that I was the only one who was aware of the toxicity of it, that I was the only one aware of this person having issues and not being simple. But then I ended up, everybody kind of stepped back and that relationship fell apart and they left the group, I found out a lot of people didn't like this person. A lot of people saw through them. So here, what often happens is we don't want to set this person off, that we'll end up acting like we have a relationship and connection when really we don't. That we're just biding our time with this person, trying not to make waves because we don't want them to pick on us too. So as much as I'm not saying that's right or good, sometimes people who look like flying monkeys aren't always as much of a flying monkey as you think they are. Sometimes they're just trying to survive because they need or depend on that person in some way, and they don't want to create this big riff in the way that they see the riff happening with you. it doesn't make it right. I'm not saying it makes it right, but that sometimes is what's happening. And finding Dora, I'm glad you found my channel too. I'm so glad you're here as well. And that we can talk about these things together and that you're finding help. I do find I love the community here. I really love the community that we've got talking about this stuff, that you guys come and you know that I'm here on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. I really love hanging out. So Wellness Rose, you just found out you have autism. Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I found out right after I got out of that toxic relationship as well, that I was autistic. My sons were autistic, so it wasn't I already kind of recognized it was happening in my family, but when I discovered I had it too, like so much fell into place for me. It really it just, so many things started to make sense. My childhood made sense, my sensitivity made sense, my difficulty sometimes, because here's the thing, one of the things about autism, and I'm not for sure it's with ADHD, but autistic people really struggle with deception. I didn't even believe it was real. I didn't think people walked around as pathological liars. Now, how could I, as a psychologist, not know that? Good grief. I knew my clients weren't always truthful with me, but I couldn't think that somebody could actually make a lifestyle of being deceptive. I don't know. I thought it was like something that happened in the movies. So when I found out that my ex was living a completely separate double life, I was stunned. Completely stunned about it. So yeah, it was shocking. So I find lying painful, honestly. I can do it. I can lie, but I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. It feels painful to me. To someone to make that as a life practice, I don't understand it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, yeah. And you're right, that toxic people are really good at making you look like you're the bad one, and that they then feel like your kids have to protect you, or they have to take sides. Because I like us to remember, toxic people, narcissistic people are competitive. They make things a win-lose. So if they don't see you two as co-parents, it's not like they want the kids on the same page with both of you. They see if the kids are close to you, then that means that they've picked a side. And so they put the kids in a bind where they have to choose. And we all know our kids don't want to choose. Our kids want both of you. They want the dad and the mom. They don't want to have to pick a side. So as a result, they try not to upset anybody. They try not to upset dad, which then means they agree with him when they know they shouldn't agree with him, because they know that that's the only way to stay in his good favor. I grew up in a toxic home. My grandmother was so manipulative, so exploitative, and she hated my mom. She hated her. And she would get my dad and her to talk about my mom and run her down. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table feeling like I didn't dare disagree. I didn't agree. Inside, I didn't agree. But I knew that if I rose to the challenge and took them on, that I was going to be then thrown out too. It was going to go really bad as well for me. So I often would sit there looking like I'm participating when inside I'm furious that this is happening. So I just want to throw that out there as a possible another angle, that sometimes your kids may not be that obtuse. Sometimes they may recognize it, but they really want to try to keep a relationship with both people as much as they can. And Blissful, you're asking a really good question. Why are toxic people competitive? It has to do with their mental wiring. They actually have what's a trait deficiencies. And they have a hard time because of the inability to be empathic and connecting with you. And because of the difficulty they have with seeing you as a person and feeling like they also have a chronic issue with jealousy. So they always feel like life's not fair. In fact, honestly, I think if you gave a narcissist every single thing they ever wanted, in other words, everything always rolled their way, 100% of the time, and they came out as the richest, best, top, superior winner every single time, they still wouldn't be happy. It still wouldn't be enough. They have this insatiable hunger for more, and they always feel like anytime that anybody else gets anything, that it's literally a takeaway from them. And it's sad. It's sad that there's something inside of them that's broken that way, that they like be happy for other people, and they can't see that by sharing and us all winning that everybody wins. They just don't have that perspective. So as a result, when you win, they believe that they've lost. And if you're going to win, they would rather lose and in order to have you lose too. I know you guys have seen that so many times in these custody cases where you're like, you know what, we could both walk away from the table intact, financially intact. But their perspective is, no, if you walk away financially intact, then they're losing. They would rather like make themselves poor than have you walk away with something they feel you shouldn't have. It's just weird. It's a mindset I will never understand, except that knowing about it and being able to anticipate it really helps you protect you at the end so that you can like get ready for it and get prepared for it. There's no winning in these situations, absolutely no winning. Yeah, I agree, non-conforming woman, the hardest part to reacting is not reacting, especially when your kids are involved and they're just creating turmoil and they really want you. They know what your hot buttons are. They do. They know exactly where your most vulnerable points are, and they're going to use those points against you in order for them to make you, for you to look bad. The goal is for you to look bad. Yeah, I agree with you, Jess. You could do everything. You could give him the sky, the sun, and the moon, and the earth, and you could walk away destitute with nothing, and they still wouldn't be happy. They'd say, you have air to breathe and the sun's still shining on you. That's not fair. It's insane. It's truly insane. Bado, it's selfishness that's delusional. It's not even, I agree, it's selfishness on steroid, but it's not even reasonable selfishness. It's like, it's crazy. It's literally crazy making. Yeah, I found, Cher, that here's one of the things that I started doing in the relationship. I stopped letting my vulnerabilities be known. If something bugged me, I made sure not to let them know that it bugged me. And I found that was the best way to protect myself. But, when we're in a relationship with someone that we love, we shouldn't have to think this way. We really shouldn't have to be thinking this way. Love doesn't do this to each other. I agree, Finding Dory. You have to act like, no, that doesn't bother me, because the minute you know that you shared that it bothers you, they're going to do more of it to bother you. That's how you know that you're in a toxic relationship, when your vulnerabilities and your hot buttons and your insecurities are weaponized and used against you. Then you know that you're really in a very bad situation. So I want to wrap up today talking about 2 ways to get help. If you guys are facing these types of situations, are you getting support? Because there's 2 critical ways you can get support: by becoming a club member with Toxic Free Relationship Club. And by the way, I know that I say this repeatedly, but I offer financial abuse. I am completely, extremely flexible on that membership. It's $75 a month, but I am willing, if you want to make a case, I am very willing to negotiate that. But also, Healing Strong is a 12-week live group coaching program. We have just sold out again for October 30th, so we're full. But we're going to have a new group starting in January. So it might be something for you to think about as you get towards the end of the year. Think about your own Christmas gift. Maybe your Christmas gift is your own healing. Consider joining the Healing Strong 12-week group coaching program. Any last questions you want to throw out to me in the last couple of minutes before I wrap up today? I'm really glad you joined me today and we got to talk about reactive abuse. Next week, we're going to talk about the late stage of a trauma bond. So there are like love bombing, and then there's an early stage of like you think that you met somebody really wonderful, but you're not really for sure. Then you get into the guts of it, and it's very critical. But near the end, you start to submit and surrender and get really depressed. So I want to talk about what to do when you get into that position. You feel like, I don't know how to get out. I don't know if I should get out. I don't know if I deserve to get out. I feel really helpless, hopeless. I don't even know what to do next. So I really want to come back and talk to you next week, Tuesday at 4 p.m. about that. Mobius, silent treatment scenario right now, as much as it's painful and as much as you're hating it, I want you to think of it as space for yourself. I want you to think about, you're going to take this peace and quiet and start to think about what is it that you need to get healthier right now for yourself. They're doing it as a way to punish you, to create distress in you, but please don't let that be. Don't let it be that kind of distress. Okay, so blissful, you're asking after I blocked him and go no contact, he's now calling me 100 times a day from a no caller ID. They often do that. No, don't answer. I wouldn't answer. This is just another way to make another plea for you. This is a way for you to kind of get you back into some kind of conversation with you so that they can re-engage and renegotiate with you or stir you up. It's a way to really destroy your peace. So don't let that happen. I want to urge you, stay no contact. You know why they're doing it. You know what I often do is I just put my phone on silence. And maybe there's a way, a setting that you can turn it on for those who, like your kids, people who need to get through to you, but make it silent for everybody else so that you don't have to answer those questions. Yeah, how do you know if it's reactive abuse versus initial abuse when you're always blamed for the abuse? Initial abuse is unprovoked. It comes at you sideways and there's no basis for it. You really didn't expect it. Reactive abuse is when someone is tugging and pulling at you, provoking you, stirring you up, saying things hurtful on purpose to get a reaction. They're provoking. They're just kind of like stonewalling is a good example. I agree with you, Meryl. Stonewalling is a good way. They're being provocative. So if it comes in an absence of everything's going fine and suddenly they say something toxic, that's abuse. They don't need to do that. They're doing it just, who knows why they're doing it. But reactive abuse is deliberately, they're setting you up. And earlier in today's, I gave you a whole list of possible ways for them to do that. So if you did miss that, I would really urge you to kind of see the beginning part of this live, and it's taped on Facebook and YouTube. All right, you guys, I loved being here with you today. I will be back next Tuesday. We're going to talk about late stage trauma bond. I'll also review the stages of trauma bond. But I really love hanging out with you, and I appreciate you being here today. Thank you for this really fantastic conversation.